I teach at a haunted school in New Mexico. Unbelievable rules to survive the dark secrets. I never should have opened that door. My heart races just thinking about it. I had always heard whispers among teachers, legends of the old building where I worked. A chilling cold surrounded it. Shadows danced in the corners of my vision. But I thought they were just stories, urban legends to scare new teachers. That day changed everything. That IT started like any other Monday. I walked into the classroom, greeted by the usual noise of students. The warmth of the morning sun flooded through the windows, chasing away the night's chill. I smiled at them, but a strange weight settled in my chest. Something felt off. As I began the lesson, a sudden draft swept through the room, making the lights flicker. My students blinked, confusion spreading on their faces. Did they feel it too? But I pushed it aside. I had to focus. It was my job. But the sounds began. Low whispers, like distant voices snaking around the room. The hairs on my arms stood up. Can you hear that? I asked, my throat tight. They shook their heads, giggling nervously. Kids. They didn't understand the dread building inside me. Then, out of nowhere, a chair scraped across the floor. A loud sound, jarring like a scream. I turned, my heart thumping, expecting to see a student messing around. But the entire class was frozen, eyes wide. I felt the temperature drop. Something's not right, I whispered. The shadows darkened, creeping as if alive. My vision shifted, focusing on the back of the room where the door cracked open, just a sliver. A dark figure loomed behind it, not moving, just watching. That I couldn't breathe. I forced myself to walk closer, heart pounding against my ribcage. The air was thick, almost suffocating. I reached for the door. Then the lights went out. Complete darkness engulfed us. I could hear faint whimpers from my students, the sound of my own breath echoing in the stillness. I fought the urge to scream. Was I imagining it? Or was that figure still there? And then a sound. A soft but distinct knocking. 3 sharp taps right behind me. My back tingled with fear. I felt a presence, something cold and dark closing in. A deep chill seeped into my bones. I turned slowly, bracing for what I might see, but nothing prepared me for what happened next. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. I turned slowly, my heart pounding in my ears, the darkness thickening around us. It felt like a living entity, wrapping tight around me, squeezing the air from my lungs. I squinted, trying to pierce the shadows that dominated the room. My mind raced with dread as I heard the soft rustle of fabric, as if someone were moving just beyond my sight. Stay close. I hissed at the students, my voice trembling. I wanted to tell them to leave, but the door was just a memory now, safety lost in a void of terror. The whispers intensified, swirling around us, taunting in a language I couldn't understand. I could almost feel their icy fingers brush against my skin, sending shivers racing down my spine. And then, faintly, I heard a voice that dripped with sorrow, echoing as if it arose from the depths of a grave. Help me, who was she? Was it one of the lost souls rumored to roam the halls? Suddenly, the lights flared on, but they flickered erratically, casting long, grotesque shadows that played tricks with my vision. In that strobing illumination, I caught sight of the door, no longer ajar, but fully opened wide now, an inky void beckoning from beyond. Run. My instincts kicked in, but before I could grab any of the students, I felt something grasp my arm. Cold, lifeless fingers that sent a jolt of shock through my body. I jerked away, spinning around to confront whatever horror awaited me. but the classroom was empty. My heart sank as I scanned the room, each desk, each chair echoing the absence of my students. Panic washed over me. "Where are you?" I shouted, my voice cracking with fear, the echo of my cries swallowed by the silence. Then, I heard the soft laughter of a child, light and airy, yet laced with an unnatural, sinister undertone. It came from close behind the now closed door, the sound slithering through the cracks like smoke from a fire. My breath came in frantic gasps, dread coiling around my heart. In a sudden act of desperation, I flung myself toward the door, fingers shaking as I grasped the handle. "Open!" I shouted, willing the door to yield. It resisted, heavy as the weight of the darkness behind it. Adrenaline surged through me, and with a primal scream, I pulled on the handle, forcing it open. The moment I stepped into the hall, I was greeted by an overwhelming coldness, more penetrating than before. The hallway stretched before me, dimly lit by flickering bulbs, shadows looming like grotesque sentinels. My heartbeat thundered in my ears as I quickly panicked. "Students!" I called again, snatching at the precious pieces of courage left within me. Then I heard Ida faint whispering, like the sibilant rustle of leaves, layered with giggles. My pulse quickened, the sound leading me down the long, narrow corridor. It was intoxicating, beckoning me deeper into the heart of the school's darkness. The air was thick, saturated with a malevolence that felt sentient, alive. That I turned the corner cautiously, and that's when I saw them. Grouped together, mere shadows in the flickering light, my students stood in a half-circle around something I couldn't see. Their faces were blank, eyes wide and void of life. It was as if I'd stumbled upon a macabre tableau. "Guys? What are you doing?" I could scarcely muster any sound above a whisper. The horrible realization crashed over me, they were not like they used to be. The laughter, the whisper sit was entirely different now. Darker. One student turned slowly towards me, her eyes black voids devoid of light, as though she had become a puppet of the shadows. "Come and play with us," she said softly, but her voice echoed like 1,000 mournful wails. A jolt of terror shot through me as I stumbled backward, refusing to believe what I was seeing. I slammed the door, gasping for breath, but the laughter followed, warping around me, joining with a chorus of voices mounting into mad hysteria, and then, without warning, a force slammed against the door, as if hundreds of hands were pressing against it, desperate to be let in. The wood splintered under the pressure. I backed away, breath heavy and quick. All I could see were those hollow eyes staring through the cracks, more pupils dissolving into darkness. The door burst open. In that moment, a surge of icy wind engulfed the room, and the lights went out again, plunging me into the abyss of chaos and screams, as a new shadow rushed forward, cloaked in despair yet brimming with rage that I was not alone anymore. "Help us," it whispered. And before the screaming began, I felt it wrap its arms around me, pulling me down into the depth of its cold embrace. In the suffocating blackness, the weight of the entity pressed against me, every heartbeat magnified in the hollow expanse of silence that followed the storm of chaos. The whispers subsided, turning into a heavy, suffocating breath that curled around my throat. A paralyzing dread seeped through my limbs as I struggled to break free from the icy grip. "Let go!" I gasped, forcing myself to claw at the darkness surrounding me. My mind shrieked for clarity, for a glimpse of light, but there was nothing, only the abyss yawning wide like a maw ready to devour me. The laughter returned, raw and triumphant, a cacophony of sound peppered with desperate cries. "You're ours now," it taunted, a chorus of voices swirling in a malevolent symphony. That I seized a surge of willpower, pushing against the grasp that bound me. Desperation surged through me as I forced my eyes open, willing them to adjust to the void. And then, a flicker soft, golden light flickered to life not far from where I stood, casting strange, elongated shadows that danced mockingly around the walls. That I, in the halo of that fragile light, I saw them, the students, eyes still hollow, but now with an unearthly glow. They were watching, their expressions serene yet terrifying, as if they had transcended some veil of existence. Haunting faces framed by disheveled hair and smeared remnants of tears, they stood unyielding, like sentinels of something ancient and malevolent. "Join us," one of them repeated, an eerily melodic tone echoing in the stillness. I could see their lips move, but the voice came from everywhere and nowhere, weaving into the fabric of the shadows that clawed at my sanity. No. I screamed, my voice cracking as I bolted past them, the flicker of light dancing tantalizingly just ahead. A surge of hope clawed at my heart as I raced toward it, but with every step, the ground seemed to shift beneath me twisting, pulling me, disorienting me like a space warped by a black hole. The flickering grew erratic, and I could sense the temperature dropping sharply, each breath forming plumes of air that drifted like ghosts into darkness. A bone-chilling laugh erupted around me, mixing with whispers of betrayal and despair, almost forming words that clawed at the fringes of my sanity. Can't you see? You're trapped here forever, the voice slithered, its tones coiling around me like tendrils of smoke. Just ahead, I could see a window, a glimmer of hope amid the encroaching shadows that I lunged for it, heart racing, every fiber of my being driven by the desperate desire to escape. But as I reached out, a force gripped me, an invisible hand, pulling me back into the depths of the haunting whispers. I spun around, breathing heavily, frantically searching for an exit, but the window surged into a wall, the entire space warping around me. Help us, came a chorus, echoing through the corridor like a death knell. A realization struck me, a bone-deep terror. The students weren't just watching, they were yearning for salvation from their own fate, and this malevolence wouldn't let me leave without becoming one of them. I fell to my knees, panic swallowing me whole as I recognized that the warmth of humanity around me flickered dimly. The floor trembled, and suddenly, the shadows began to coalesce. Shapes rose from the darkness, entities formed by despair, each twisting and writhing in agony. Then, one stepped forward, a figure cloaked in the essence of dread, its face a shifting shadow that blurred the line between agony and ecstasy. Would you like to join us? It rasped, a voice both familiar and utterly foreign, stirring unease in the depths of my memory. Without warning, the students surged at me, entangled in a desperate frenzy. Their limbs reached out, claws of fear piercing through the spiraled shadows, drawing closer, as if the very darkness was hungry for my soul. My pulse thundered in my ears, drowning out their whispers. In that moment of impending doom, a sudden clarity pierced through. The Hazian image flared in my mind, a warning, the secret I had unearthed in their eyes, a link I was unwilling to recognize, and then, the shadows cracked open, a yawning chasm of blood-red light hungrily revealing what lay within. No. I screamed, but it was too late. The hands of the darkness clutched around my throat, and as I was pulled into the depths of despair, the shadows surged and converged, laughter roaring in triumph as everything shattered, and then silence. The silence enveloped me like a funeral shroud, wrapping its heavy fabric around my body, squeezing the breath from my lungs. Instinctively, I reached out into the void, my fingertips brushing against something cold and unyielding. Panic surged once more, clawing at my mind, but it was the realization that I was not alone in this black expanse that sent a fresh wave of terror crashing over me. Help me. The whisper echoed, thin and fragile, like a candle flickering in a storm. I turned my head, searching for the source, but my surroundings betrayed me. They shifted as if the darkness itself were alive, breathing, pulsing with an eerie consciousness. Please, came the voice again, and this time, I recognized it. It was Daniel, one of the students, a bright spark snuffed out far too soon. The memory of his laughter was tainted by the image of his lifeless eyes, the hollow shell left behind when he had become a mere shade haunting this place. Straining against the weights of despair, I called into the void, Daniel. Is that you? My voice trembled, echoing through the dark passageways, ricocheting against unseen walls. For a moment, the darkness seemed to hold its breath, and then I felt a cold breeze that whispered secrets of the forsaken. I'm scared, his voice floated back to me, mingling with the oppressive darkness. They won't let us leave. They want our souls, our memories. They feed on us. Where are you? I'm coming. I shouted, the urgency fueling my resolve. I pressed forward, instinct gripping me like a vice. The air was thick with the scent of mildew, the tang of decay lurking beneath the surface, and shadows flitted just outside my line of vision, teasing at the corners of my mind. Suddenly, the darkness split open, revealing a dimly lit corridor. With uneven breaths, I stepped inside a narrow tunnel that seemed to stretch infinitely in both directions, flickering lights hanging overhead like stars that had fallen from the sky. Walls pulsated, covered in long-forgotten graffiti that told tales of despair, resembling the twisted faces of tortured souls. Here. Come this way. Daniel's voice echoed again, more insistent now, pulling me farther down the corridor. I raced toward the sound, adrenaline coursing through my veins. The weight of despair clung to the air, and the shadows drew closer, the edge of their sentience brushing against my skin with an icy caress that I nearly stumbled as I reached a door at the end of the corridor, heavy and ominous. It groaned as I pushed against its surface, the stench of stagnation washing over me like an unholy breath. Beyond the threshold, a grotesque scene unfolded. Students were seated in a hollowed-out classroom, their gazes locked ahead, bodies frozen in a tableau of horror. In front of them stood a dark figure, familiar yet horrifying. Its features were obscured by swirling shadows, but the malevolent grin carved into its face sent chills clawing down my spine. It was as if the embodiment of dread had taken form, a dark reflection of the hope I had come seeking. Welcome, welcome, the figure crooned, voice dripping with twisted amusement as I stepped through the door. To the final lesson, Daniel. I cried out, but fear clawed through the warmth of my heart. I could see him, sitting in that endless row of students, his body rigid, eyes glazed over, as though he were caught in a trance. They're here to learn, the figure continued, gesturing to the other trapped souls. You see, when one of your kind truly accepts their fate, they can help instruct the next generation on how to be devoured. Stop. Let him go. My resolve strengthened, and I lunged forward, but the shadows tightened their grip, forming chains of darkness that dragged me back. The students began to chant, a low and disturbing hymn that rose into a swell of eerie harmonics, echoing off the walls like a funeral dirge. The cacophony pulled at the very fabric of my sanity, each note striking deep within, reminding me of times long lost. Join us. Daniel cried, a plea wrapped in torment. His voice, once filled with life, now trembled with the weight of their truth. I felt the darkness ripple around me, sentient and alive, a tangible hunger that intensified with every moment. Then, just as I caught a glimpse of his haunted eyes, the room trembled violently. A powerful force slammed against another door at the far end of the classroom, thundering as if something monstrous sought to break free. The figure's grin widened, eyes alight with a savage delight. Ah, it seems our lesson is about to reach a horrifying climax. The chanting crescendoed, and the students' faces twisted in anguish, their bodies writhing against the confines of their seats. I felt the shadows wrap tighter around me, suffocating and eager to take me. Just as I was about to scream in utter despair, the door shattered open, revealing an unholy light that surged into the room, a blinding illumination that broke through the veil of darkness, and then complete chaos erupted. The shadows screamed in pain, the students shrieked, and the ground shook as if the very foundation of this cursed school was being torn apart. In that swirling maelstrom of terror, a familiar hand reached out toward me, fingers grasping just beyond my reach. Help me! Daniel pleaded, and for a fleeting moment, I hesitated. But then, drawn in by the blinding light and the obliteration of all I feared, I stumbled closer to the chaos, unaware of the price I was about to pay, and with one final, deafening roar, everything exploded into darkness once again. The darkness wrapped around me like a thick fog, smothering the remnants of the blinding light until even the memory dissolved into the void. My senses swirled in tumult, my pulse pounded in my ears like a war drum, reminding me I was alive in a space where countless souls had met their end. I floated through a liminal haze, disoriented and lost, until the silhouette of the figure emerged once more, looming like a specter out of a nightmare. Did you really think the light could save you? It taunted, voice oozing with seduction and contempt. Each word dripped like venom, slithering into my mind, chipping away at the threads of sanity that tethered me in this hellscape. Even as I held on to the fragments of courage, my heart trembled with a growing dread, realizing the truth. There was no escaping what lurked here. That I forced myself to move, my damp palms pressing against the ground, the contact grounding me despite the chill that seeped through my skin. As I pushed to my feet, my surroundings shifted again, revealing a wall of mirrors that extended beyond what my eyes could see. They reflected not only the physical form of this cursed reality but also what lay beneath the fears and regrets tear-stained on the surface of every student still trapped in that dark classroom. Instinctively I searched their reflections, desperately hoping to catch a glimpse of Daniel. I was met, however, by a kaleidoscope of anguish. One mirrored face twisted in sorrow, another shrieked silently in terror, and through the reflections danced the shadowy remnants of those who had succumbed to the darkness, their eyes now vacant holes swallowed by despair. "Join us, join us!" came the echoing wails from the depths of the mirrors, the cry of lost souls reverberating through my core. Suddenly, the glass rippled and contorted, and from it emerged a twisted semblance of Daniel, his form flickering between the familiar and the grotesque. The anguished reflection bore the teeth of grief, it grinned wide as if relishing my torment. "Help me! Help us!" he beseeched, his voice both hauntingly close and painfully distant. "No!" I screamed, staggering back, every muscle in my body screaming to flee. But it was no use, the mirrors encased me, warping the fabric of my reality, dragging my thoughts into an endless snare of despair. "Face your fate," the figure taunted, but I was still unwilling to surrender. Just as the sorrow poured forth like rain, exhausting my ability to resist, a crack appeared in the wall of mirrors, gaping wide like a maw poised to consume me. From the depths of that gaping hole, an icy breath poured forth, carrying whispers of promises and prophecies. "You will learn, oh yes, you will learn the cost of your desperation. And then, you will join the lesson." The floor beneath me shuddered, the mirrors thrumming in response, their surfaces alive with shifting images that clawed at the remnants of my sanity. I turned to flee, heading toward what remained of the corridor as the shadows writhed and slithered in pursuit that I stumbled further into the darkness, past the bodies of phantom students I could now see more clearly, spilled souls strewn across the ground in unnatural positions, eyes glistening with unshed tears of despair. Each figure was a heartbreaking reminder of how easily one could become enmeshed in this wicked web. My breath quickened, not from exhaustion but from an instinctive awareness that whatever lurked behind me was growing ever closer. The darkness suddenly flickered to life, and though it was heart-stopping, I did not stop to question. I darted down another corridor, a passage that twisted and turned like a labyrinth, the very architecture of the school shifting against me, conspiring to keep me hopelessly lost. Then I heard Ida whispering that transcended all boundaries of sound, rising above the dark. "Join us, we will give you what you seek." Fingers of frost wrapped around my throat, an icy hand chilling my spine, as shadows swarmed closer, their intent palpable. My heart thundered with the ferocity of lambs to the slaughter. In that moment, I felt the manifestation of my darkest fears materializing before me. They danced in the periphery, echoing the laughter of the students who had been consumed, driven not just by fear but by an instinctual need to find the truth. I tore past a rotted classroom overflowing with spectral visions and cries of tangled despair. There were echoes interwoven within the fabric of reality, memories, shadows of a life entwined with tragedy. Just as I approached a door at the end of the hallway, something grabbed my ankle. Unearthly fingers coiling around my flesh like a vice. I looked down to see a shadowed figure pulling me into a gaping darkness beneath the floor, its anguished whispers mingling with the pleads of long-forgotten souls. "Help us please," I howled, desperation surging, wrenching myself away from the grip that sought to drag me into the abyss. But as I staggered forward, the door swung open of its own volition, revealing an endless chasm filled with swirling darkness and flickering lights that felt eerily familiar, echoes of my own memories entangled with those who had come before. With one final scream, I dove toward the door and into its depths, propelled by the instinct to escape even as the shadows lashed behind me. The air thickened as I fell, cascading into unknown realms, the darkness closing in, and the last thing I heard was Daniel's voice, clearer than ever: "Join us or lose yourself forever." Just as I landed, the ground shifted violently beneath me. I realized with horror I was no longer in the maze of the school but in a domain far worse. The air shifted around me, suffocating and dense like the breath of a sleeping monster. I landed with a thud on cold stone, the chill biting deeply into my bones. Shadows danced along the walls, casting an array of shapes that coiled unnaturally like fingers grasping for me. With a heart-racing intrepidation, I took in my surroundings, a cavernous chamber illuminated by flickering lights strung haphazardly across the ceiling. "Where am I?" I whispered numbly, my voice swallowed by the silence that felt almost sentient, as though the darkness itself was waiting for my answer. On the walls, grotesque faces appeared and faded with the shadows, their hollow eyes watching, judging. The stench of decay hung heavy, almost suffocating. I cautiously rose to my feet, my senses probing the air for any sign of escape. The walls pulsated with a life of their own, resembling a beating heart that throbbed in rhythm with my own, instilling a creeping sense of shared existence with whatever presence lurked within the depths. "Daniel?" I called, my voice echoing back to me, a mocking simulation of the desperation I felt. Nothing answered except the whispers of the shadows, weaving tales of torment. They spoke of students who had tried to escape, their voices a weave of sorrow and entreaty. "Help us find the truth." As I ventured deeper into the chamber, the light flickered erratically, revealing discrepancies in space around me. I stumbled upon odd shapes jutting from the ground, relics of a forsaken classroom. Torn desks, shattered chairs, enemy breath hitching what appeared to be the tattered remnants of student projects hung suspended in the air like teetering tombstones. Each piece emanated a sense of loss, a tangible reminder of the dreams crushed by the weight of the unseen. And then I saw her. A girl sat hunched in the corner, her form pale and translucent against the backdrop of the shadows. Her gaze was locked onto me, wide and pleading yet devoid of hope. "Help me," she whispered, each syllable discordantly melodic, a lullaby that suggested peaceful surrender. "Who are you?" I approached cautiously, my instincts screaming against the inevitability that clung to her presence. "I am lost," she replied, her words tinged with a haunting melancholy. Like all of us, suddenly, a heavy vibration thrummed through the floor, rippling beneath my feet, sparking a sudden urgency in the air. The shadows surged forward, drawn to the girl's voice like moths to a flame. I felt a pull tightening in my chest, as though my spirit was tethered to whatever darkness surrounded us. "You cannot stay here," I shouted, my heart racing against an impending onslaught. "You have to come with me." But she remained rooted in place, eyes hollowing as the shadows slithered closer, reaching for her. "Be free of this world." She stretched a finger toward the encroaching darkness, anguish glistening in her eyes. "You must take my place. It seeks someone new." "No. I want." I screamed, but the whispers grew louder, drowning out my voice. "Please, no. Don't let them take you." In an instant, she vanished, swallowed whole by the swirling mass of shadows that exploded forward, dragging me into their abyss. I stumbled back, primal instinct propelling me to escape, but the darkness surged against me, a horde bent on ensnaring my soul. I clawed at the ground, metallic tang filling my mouth. Panic seized me as the chamber flickered and twisted, revealing flashes of distressing memories, the very faces I had seen in the mirrors, now warped and distorted, more vivid in their anguish. "Join us." They cried in unison, their voices echoing like an unholy choir. "Join us or face the lesson." Something grasped my ankle, an unyielding grip that sent icy tendrils climbing up my leg, forcing me to the ground. As I turned, I was met with the wide, shadowy eyes of countless students, faces oozing with despair, reaching toward me like desperate souls tethered to their dark pasts. No. I screamed, writhing against the force that pulled me backward toward the undulating maw of darkness. "I want to become one of you, with every ounce of strength." I lunged forward, fighting against the grasp of despair pulling at me from the floor beneath, only to see the girl's face again, now distorted and twisted into a nightmarish visage that mirrored the grief of all those trapped here. "You have to take my place." The echoes from the long-lost souls enveloped me, their cries rising to a crescendo until all I could hear was the agonizing intermingling of voices. Suddenly, the ground quaked, and the shadows screamed, as I felt myself being drawn into an immense portal that opened beneath me. As it swallowed me whole, my vision darkened, and I heard one final, chilling proclamation echoing in my ears: "Only one can be saved, one must take the lesson." And with that, the darkness shattered around me, and I plummeted into chaos, not knowing where I might land, a world entwined with both horrific and tantalizing truths, leaving me teetering on the edge of despair and possibility. The fall was a disorienting whirlwind of sound and sensation, pulling me into a realm suffused with an oppressive weight that pressed heavily on my chest. I landed with a hard thud on a damp floor that gave off an acrid smell of mildew and dust. The air felt electric, crackling with the residue of despair. As I pushed myself up, goosebumps dotted my skin, the silence hung thick, a belly full of storm clouds waiting to unleash a torrent. Daniel? My voice sounded distant and hollow, reverberating off unseen walls. I was in a corridor lined with dimly lit lockers, their paint peeling away like the skin of a long-lost corpse. The flickering overhead lights cast elongated shadows that swayed like specters, filling me with an overwhelming sense of dread, as if I was being hunted down. My heartbeat thundered as I wandered deeper into the corridor, the suffocating darkness consumed every flicker of hope I clutched. Whispers began to rise around me, a horde of voices speaking muffled secrets that brushed against my ears, threatening to unveil disturbing truths. Each low murmur felt like cold caresses along my spine, urging me to learn the cruel lessons inscribed in the very bones of this place. Find us. The whispers seemed to swirl around me, pulling me toward the far end of the corridor where an apparition flickered briefly in the dim light. It slipped away as quickly as it had appeared, leaving only a faint echo of laughter that curled like smoke into the air. I pressed forward, my footsteps echoing, each sound magnified in the oppressive stillness. Suddenly, the lockers shook violently, and I instinctively took a step back, instinctively peering closer at the one nearest to me. The paint bubbled as though alive, oozing a strange dark liquid that began to pool beneath my feet, pooling into grotesque shapes that morphed into anguished faces, silently screaming. This hall seemed to twist under the gravity of its own sorrow, and the very structure groaned as if it were trying to expel its malcontents. My thoughts raced. I needed to escape. As I turned to backtrack, I collided with something solid. Stumbling backward, I looked up into a pair of hollow, dark eyes set in a gaunt face, eyes that held centuries of anguish. "You shouldn't be here," he rasped, the words emanating like smoke from his lips. "You're drawn to the lesson like the rest." Panic surged within me. "What lesson? Who are you?" A chilling smile cracked his lips, revealing teeth stained with the secrets of the damned. "A lesson of survival. The only way out is to understand what was taken from them." His face melted away into shadows as he pointed back towards the far end of the corridor. Entranced by a force beyond my control, I found myself drawn back toward the door through which I had arrived, and to my horror, I noticed a faint light seeping from beneath it. As I reached for the handle, a piercing shriek rang out, reverberating through the hollow space like bone on bone. The world trembled. The whispers escalated to a fever pitch, bursting forth in a cacophony of sorrow, anger, and despair, a twisted assembly of all those who had learned the lesson before me. "Don't open the door," they warned, their voices melding into an unsettling harmony, but I was already enraptured, the glow beyond the door pulling at my core. With a deep breath, I turned the handle, and the door swung open, revealing a scene beyond comprehension, a classroom illuminated by a sickly glow, filled with students seated at their desks, all with eyes fixed vacantly ahead. A grotesque figure loomed by the blackboard, writhed in an unnatural ballet, arms extending impossibly long, a ravenous hunger embodied. "Welcome to the lesson," the figure crooned, its voice both welcoming and grotesquely dissonant. It turned, revealing a face like a pamphlet gone wrong, amorphous and shifting as though it was woven from nightmares. That I froze, a primal instinct screaming for escape, but the door swung shut behind me with a deafening thud, merging into the wall as though it had never existed. The weight of their eyes began to press down on me, filling me with the chilling realization that the lesson was not meant for me to learn. It was a test of my survival. Desperate, I glanced to the students, hoping to find Daniel among them, but the faces barely registered. They carried an aura of emptiness, their joy and anguish siphoned away, leaving merely shells. "Answer the question," the creature hissed, its voice echoing through the chamber, each word heavy with malevolence. "Only one of you can escape." The students turned their heads in unison, their eyes penetrating into my very soul. I could feel their confusion and despair rising like a wave in a storm. This was a nightmare, and yet it felt achingly real. What question could hold so much power? Before I could even comprehend the weight of the moment, the creature leaned closer, an abyss of blackness yawning where its mouth should be, and I heard the question murmur through the room as if everyone was in league with it. "Who deserves to live?" A chilling silence fell through the hall, broken only by the growing pulse of dread in my chest. and the surreal cacophony of pleading eyes bore down on me, pinning me between them and the consuming wrath of the creature. Every breath felt like a gasp for salvation as the weight of their hope and despair bore down on my shoulders. Who among us was worthy? My mind raced toward a conclusion, but paralysis began to envelop me, and as the creature's lips curled into a nightmarish smile, the agony built to an unbearable crescendo. Choose. The creature bellowed, and in that instant, the light above shattered into a storm of radiant shards, each fragment glinting with the raw agony of past students. And then came a voice, deeper than the abyss, whispering from the shadows, "Only one can be saved, and it may not be who you think that I am." That moment of revelation, I felt the room tilt and twist, the air thick with unearthly tension, and I realized a horrifying truth: my choice may determine not just my fate, but the fate of all those trapped in this waking nightmare. The shards of light cascaded around me like falling stars, piercing the thick darkness with shimmering blades of agony and despair. I ducked instinctively, but even beneath my shielded gaze, the brutal intensity of their luminescence burned through my eyelids, igniting a primal fear deep within me. With each shard that struck the floor, I could feel the weight of lost souls bolting toward me, swirling in a tempest of unresolved torment. Choose. The creature echoed again, its voice now a sinister melody, wrapping around reason like an iron grip. The sound of its laughter filled the space, erupting with manic glee. In that moment, I was acutely aware of the impossibility of my situation. The weight of unseen eyes pressed upon me, whispering their hopes and fears. How could I make a decision that could damn or save an unknown number of tortured souls? Who deserves to live? I muttered under my breath, shifting my gaze from the bizarre figure to the students, their empty faces, devoid of life. Desperation clawed at me, and I fought against the rising tide of panic that threatened to consume me whole. My mind scrambled for clarity. In the muted silence, I reached for any shred of discernment, every shared moment, every laugh, every hatred, every flicker of human connection. I swept my gaze across their ashen faces, searching for any sign of familiarity, desperately hunting for Daniel. Instead, I met the glassy stare of a girl whose eyes still held remnants of joy. She looked as if she had just stepped out of some long-forgotten memory, the relic of someone important, spirited away far too soon. But who was she? My heart screamed, if only I could find Daniel, I might know how to choose. I took a half-step forward, but the creature snapped its elongated fingers, prompting the demon students to stir and murmur. A dark symphony of despair enveloped me once more. Bring forth the deserving, the creature commanded, its voice a gravelled echo that vibrated through the room's very fabric. Instinctively, the students shifted in their seats, their heads tilting in unison toward me, expressions unchanging but intent, waiting for my single act of pity or judgment that could turn one life into oblivion. Gritting my teeth, I forced a shout over the rising chaos: what if I can't choose? A gust of stagnant air cascaded over me, drawing gasps from the students as if my words were a ritualistic incantation. The creature's expression twisted into a grotesque parody of a frown, deepening its cavernous mouth into a chasm. Failure to choose is still a choice. And those who cannot decide shall bear the burden of others' sins. A rumbling erupted beneath my feet, and the classroom shifted violently, transforming into an infinite void, drawn by the essence of regrets that had etched themselves into the very foundations of this hell. The teacher's laughter crescendoed until it felt like a knife underwater, cutting through reason. Gazes from the students intensified as the tension in the room curled around us, binding me with invisible strands, drawing tighter and tighter. That I stumbled backward, the edges of my vision blurring, the reality of the moment crashing upon me like a rogue wave. In the throes of despair, I began to remember it, an image of Daniel in a red t-shirt, his face alight with laughter, standing beside me on a sunny day like no other. "It's okay," he had said, "even if we're different, we still belong together." My heart quickened as a realization met his. Was not merely about survival, it was about belonging, about the painful truths we ignore out of fear. And just as suddenly, with the clarity of a revelation born from the echoes of the past, I felt a pull toward Daniel, conjured by ghosts of my own choices and their consequences. Daniel. He deserves a chance. I finally shouted, my chest tightening as I spoke his name. The murmurs stilled, though the weight of uncertainty shifted into a dense fog around me. Did I truly know about Daniel? Where was he now? Had he already succumbed? The creature's eyes glimmered with malignant delight, the darkness melding with shadows as it leaned closer, the distortion of its face flickering like a moth flirting with a flame. So be it, it addressed the void surrounding us. But the moment stretched agonizingly, halfway between horror and realization, as a disembodied voice whispered from the shadows, deeper than the echoes of despair, "But is it his life you wish to save or your own?" As if in response to the inquiry, chains clinked in the distance, and from the corner of my eye, I noticed a door creaking open with an ominous slowness. Faint outlines of figures emerged beyond, faces twisted in anguish and fear. Was Daniel there? Were they here for him, for me, or to seal my fate? The classroom began to pulse, and with each heartbeat, the very essence of dread grew heavier, until it became unbearable. I took a step toward the door, torn between the beckoning shadows and the fragile hope of salvation, and then came the chilling revelation: the faces beyond the door, spectral and thin, began to smile, revealing black voids where their eyes should be. It was then I understood, this choice had become an offering, a gamble not just of life and death, but of every choice I had ever made that had led me to this moment. As the figures lurked closer, their hallowed whispers entwining with my thoughts, the air thickened, and the pounding in my chest was a countdown. The question remained: would I dare step through the threshold of salvation, to find Daniel, and bear witness to the truth that lay waiting on the other side? "Choose wisely," the creature hissed, the hunger in its gaze palpable, as I found myself inching towards the door's dark embrace, the very roots of despair pulling me forward, a single thought echoing in my mind: am I ready for what waits beyond? With one last shuddering breath, the light swelled, and the door creaked wide, flooding the room with an overwhelming brightness that consumed everything in its glow. A figure stepped into view just as the shadows dimmed, and with a voice that could soothe yet burn like acid, it spoke a name: Daniel. In that moment, the ground beneath me tipped further into chaos, a heartbeat away from an undeniable truth rampaging into the void. The blinding light shrank into an agonizing pinprick, yet the figure on the threshold remained. It was Daniel, but something was dreadfully wrong. The light hit his silhouette, illuminating features that had once been bright and warm, now twisted and contorted under the weight of shadow. His eyes, once so vibrant, had become twin abysses, reflecting a despair that resonated with my own. "You shouldn't have come," he spoke, voice like gravel scraping against bone, the warmth chased away by frigid fear that cocooned my heart. "Daniel." I stumbled forward, arms reaching out as if to embrace him, but dread paralyzed me, each footfall weighed down by the gravity of uncertainty. I thought I could save you. I chose you," he chuckled, a sound that echoed with malice, and the laughter swelled, reverberating off the walls, a cacophony that churned my insides. "You think choices matter in this place? You think there are prizes for favorites?" His voice dropped low as he leaned closer, shadows threading through every syllable. "Don't you see? Every choice we've made has brought us to this abyss. I'm not the one who needs saving." The room shifted again, walls pulsating with an unseen heartbeat, and the students around me began to dissolve, their forms retreating into layers of shadow. Where they had once been trapped souls begging for release, now they faded into a liquid darkness, leaving echoes of their frustration and rage trapped in the space between breaths. No. I screamed, but the word drowned in the swell of encroaching terror. "What do you mean? Look closer," he urged, stepping back into the void while the ground trembled. I was losing him, but a primal instinct pulled me to the threshold beyond which lurked answers, and in that moment, I was left hanging, a marionette caught in the threads of fate against my will. Suddenly, the air grew dense, charged with an energy that quickened every nerve in my body. I was not alone. The amorphous shapes I had seen earlier crawled back into the room, shifting and writhing like living shadows, a mass of despair and hope entwined with one another. Their faces twisted into grins that made my skin crawl, eyes growing larger, reflecting secrets I could never hope to understand. "You know nothing," the shadows chorused in a voice that was unsettlingly sweet, yet laced with venom. "Are you ready to take responsibility for what you cannot control?" "No. I didn't want any of this," I shouted back, but my words seemed swallowed by the shadows' laughter, a chilling symphony resonating through the depths of the room. "I chose Daniel. What more do you want from me, your soul?" they whispered as one, their gaze pinning me like a sacrificial offering upon an altar built of broken promises and unanswered prayers. You were never meant to escape. In an instinctive surge, I turned my attention back toward Daniel, but he had vanished into the swelling sea of darkness, the echoes of his revelation cascading over me. Every moment together vanished, reduced to mere motifs of nostalgia, lost within the folds of despair. Choose. The creature's voice boomed again, sending a wave of agony crashing through me, a reminder that time was slipping away like sand through my fingers. Panicked, I searched within myself for strength, clinging to the memories that danced before meth laughter, the camaraderie, the promise of friendship. But instead, all I felt was the residual heaviness of choices that had spiraled beyond my grasp. I had been blind to their true consequence, shackled to decisions that would forever alter the fabric of my existence. Down the corridor, the thrumming heartbeat of the place intensified, a reminder that I was trapped in a web woven from my fears and confrontations with the past. The shadows pressed closer, their laugh snarls grating against my resolve. Make a choice, or we shall make it for you. The weight of anguish crushed me, and I dropped to my knees, the floor cool against my skin. It was never just about life or death, I realized out loud, like a prayer to the darkened sky above. It was about facing the truth I have hidden. For too long, the words hung in the air, heavy with meaning, and for the first time, I felt a flicker of warmth amidst the chilling despair. The students whispered among themselves again, this time more insistent, their shapes coalescing in and out, morphing between the spectral and familiar, but then, abruptly, as if cut by an unseen blade, a scream ripped through the air, an anguished wail that seemed to echo through time itself. No. Don't do it. The voice shattered the atmosphere, reverberating deep inside my bones, and I realized in horror that it came from Daniel's lips, pierced through the shadows that engulfed him. Run! I heard him cry, but it was too late. The shadows dove forward with a ferocity unleashed, and as they enveloped me, I was left with a terrible understanding on my lips. I was about to bear witness to something unfathomable, a reckoning neither of us could possibly escape. The ground cracked beneath our feet as the classroom began to tilt wildly, and suddenly, I was spiraling down into the darkness, yelling Daniel's name, grasping for shadows as they swirled around me, limbs, faces, cries, all demanding reckoning as the fabric of reality split apart, and the final truth loomed like an unstoppable storm just beyond comprehension. That a single thought crossed my mind: in this haunted space, who would pay the price for the choices made in fear? The darkness closed in, and with a last piercing cry of "I choose," I plunged forward, searching for light, for Daniel, and even worse, confronting what might become of me in a realm where choices were the prelude to despair. At that moment, the room faded into an echoing oblivion, and I could only hope my choice had not sealed both our fates forever. The cold seeped into my bones as I was swallowed by the depths of darkness, my senses betraying me in the quiet storm of chaos. I fell through shadows thick like smoke, disoriented, weightless, until I landed with an unceremonious thud against the ancient floor. I blinked against a sudden light that pierced through the gloom, a soft, forgiving glow that felt almost like a memory trying to surface. But fear twisted in my gut. This light felt wrong, too bright, too tainted, calling out with the voices of the students and whispering promises of salvation. Daniel. I called into the void, hoping desperately his figure would materialize like a lighthouse in this swirling torment. But my voice fell silent, devoured by the piercing echoes of my own desperation. An apparition appeared, one of the specters I had seen earlier, beckoning me with hollow eyes. You chose, it whispered, the tone sugary and sickly, tugging at the frayed edges of my psyche. You chose to leave him behind. You chose this abyss. Every word dripped with malevolence, cutting through the tendrils of hope that still simmered within me. I tried to stand, forcing my legs to comply, but an unseen weight pinned me down, melding my fate with the emptiness around me. No. I tried to save him. Its laughter echoed back at me, an agonizing sound that reverberated against the walls of despair. You cannot save what is already lost. You think Daniel was saving you? No. He was tethering you like a marionette. Now you must choose, again, choose. I stammered, understanding dawning like a cold blade in my heart. Before I could gather myself, the realm shifted once more, and the classroom materialized around rows of desks filled with students' unseeing eyes, all fixed on me, their breath synchronized with the whispering darkness that flanked the walls. "Daniel!" I shouted once more. Moments felt like hours as I scoured the now familiar faces, but all I found were echoes of their presence, hollow visages stripped of innocence, victims of choices never made. My pulse quickened, horror rising within me like bile. They were lost, worse, trapped under the weight of the very choices I had been forced to make. "Help us," a voice murmured from the back, a voice that echoed my own, layered with sorrow and fear. I turned to find her, a girl with hair dark and matted, tears lined her cheeks like scars carved from despair. "Please, help us." And in that moment, clarity gripped me like a vice. They weren't just students, they were reflections of my own fractured self, reminders of every choice I'd turned away from, every possibility I'd shattered in my relentless pursuit of salvation. "Daniel, it was never about leaving you. It was about facing this together," I whispered, tears spilling warm against the cold abyss. "I choose you, all of you." The room erupted in a cacophony of cries, joy mixed with agonias. The shadows writhed and roared in protest, contorting under the pressure of my decision. The familiar figure of Daniel appeared at the front, yet he looked different, still with the vacant eyes but no longer a shade of despair. Now there was a flicker of hope behind them. "You agreed," he said, voice thick with resonance. "You chose to face them. Us." The shadows twisted in defiance, swirling and lamenting, pulling back against the rising tide of light that embraced me. "No. You cannot carry the weight of their truths. The lesson must never be shared." A dark figure cried, its voice booming with rage as it erupted from the recesses of the classroom, rage incarnate attempting to reclaim its lost power, but as terrifying as it was, I stood my ground. "You can't keep them. Their voices will rise above this darkness." Suddenly, the students surged, an ethereal brightness cascading from their forms. Each shadow they shed was like a buried promise, lost but ready to be freed. I felt something profound shift, a connection that surged through the very fabric of this wretched school. They were not simply lost souls, they were pieces of my own heart and conscience that in one collective scream, the darkness split, a rift perfectly reversed to the oppressive weight, revealing a pathway and entryway into something brighter and pure. And there, standing at the edge, was Daniel, face radiant, pulling me to join him. In that moment, I made my final choice. "Together," I declared, taking his hand. As we stepped forward, the shattering of darkness rumbled like thunder, and the creature's anguished scream echoed behind us as the barrier tore apart. But as our fingers interlocked, a shiver of uncertainty thrummed through my heart. The moment was too beautiful, too bright, a twin flame of hope against the pitch black of previous despair, and just as the light enveloped us whole, an icy whisper slithered in the back of my mind, a warning echoing through the remnants of the shadows: "Not all can escape. The choice isn't always singular." And in that moment, amid the searing brightness and enveloping warmth, the sickening weight pressed down once more, my heart pounding. I felt the truth materialize. I had chosen to face my darkness, to consume Daniel's grief, but this salvation bore a cost I could not fathom. The voices faded into a whispering wind, and as I stepped into the blinding light, the final chilling realization crept in. The dark still lingered, and it craved more. The last thing I heard before everything dissolved into oblivion was Daniel's quivering voice, reverberating through the void: "You're still not done. One last lesson awaits." And that haunting truth echoed endlessly within the infinite space that followed.